Dobar dan svima. Ovo je profesorka Emine Serdaroglu sa Istanbulskog univerziteta. Ona će danas održati interaktivno predavanje na temu koja je nama već ovde dostupna, dakle četvorica turskih kompozitora. Samo jedno pitanje što tiče praćenja engleskim ili svima u redu, nema potrebe za simultanim prevodom, dobro, ok.
In English.
Yes, you will do it in English. So if some other students get in after the lectures, it won't be a problem, right? Okay. It's not going to be a problem if they...
No problem. They can come in and exit.
Have a good lecture.
Thank you. Well, I'm happy to be here today. We came here, we worked last year with Andrea in a collaborative project in Istanbul. We gave a concert. And it started this project. We decided to do a concert here in Nišu. And I asked for him, is it okay if I give a lecture about the Turkish composers? And he said yes, so I'm very happy to be here at the faculty today. I would like to introduce myself a little bit before I start talking about the composers. I started my piano studies at a young age, and I studied piano performance at Illinois Wesleyan University in the United States. And I entered my master's as a piano performance major at University of Texas at Austin. But then I decided that I'm interested in piano pedagogy. So I changed departments and I moved to piano pedagogy department. Then I graduated, came back to Istanbul, started working at Boğaziçi University as a lecturer. And then I decided to go into musicology for my PhD. And I have two research subjects that I'm interested in. One subject is piano pedagogy, of course, and I'm especially interested in works of Turkish composers. And the second subject is the development of institutions in Turkey, especially institutions that teach Western music education, the conservatories and other orchestras and different kind of institutions. I believe as a pianist, you have to learn fairly quickly when you are older, because as you graduate, you start accompanying people, you start playing chamber music, and people ask you, oh, there's a concert in a month, can you play? And you, of course, you say yes, and you have to learn fairly quickly if it's not a repertoire that you already know. So I believe as a young student, it's best when you learn different pieces, different composers, and different time periods. So as a student, if you get involved with music from different cultures, from different periods, it's very important, because as conservatory students, we all get educated with major European composers. You know, you have to learn Bach, you have to learn Beethoven, you have to learn Mozart, but then, you know, as you graduate, you also have to play contemporary music. Sometimes you have to play new music, you know, different styles. So it's best to introduce the children to also different repertoire. And Turkish composers from this era, from the early 20th century, composed a lot of music for children. And the reason for that is, during the Ottoman Empire time, the main music institution was in Istanbul, in the palace. It was called Müzikâ-i Humayun, which is the palace orchestra. But there weren't any other main conservatories. That was the main institution. And Western music was the entertainment music in Istanbul. There were a lot of opera houses in Istanbul. There were entertainments in the palace. People came in the 19th century, like Franz Liszt came to give a concert in Istanbul, then he was invited to the palace, he gave a concert in the palace, but it was very limited. But as the Turkish Republic was formed in 1923, Atatürk started a lot of reforms. And some of these reforms were done in had a lot of cultural elements. And what they did, they sent a lot of students to Europe as performers, as composition students, and they were sent there with scholarship, with state scholarships. They came back to Ankara, and Ankara was the source of new institutions. There was the music teachers school. There was the new conservatory, which will come up, which came up in 1936, Ankara State Conservatory, and there were a lot of things happening. So they came back as composers, and they started teaching composition, harmony, instruments, and there weren't that many material in the school, so they started composing for children. So there are a lot of compositions by these 4 composers for advanced students and also for younger students. So I will start talking about, I chose 4 composers, Ulvi Cemal Erkin, Ahmet Adnan Saygun, Ekrem Zeki Un, and Yüksel Koptagel as the composers that I'm presenting today. And I would like to start with Ulvi Cemal Erkin, born in 1906, died in 1972. He is a composer, pianist, conductor. He started his first piano lessons with his mother, and later he was sent to Paris with a scholarship. And here you can see one of the famous names, Nadia Boulanger. As you may know, she was teacher of many contemporary composers, so he had a chance to work with her at École Normale de Musique in Paris. And later he goes back to Turkey in 1930, and he starts teaching piano and composition at music teacher school. And in this period, he starts, composing pieces for children as well. And in 1936, Ankara State Conservatory is founded because they start an institution to teach, piano educators, so that there are more music teachers in the country. But then they think, okay, we need another institution to, instruct performers. So that was the source of Ankara State Conservatory. And an important name came to Ankara. Hindemith came to Ankara. And he was the one who gave the first instructions about how to build the conservatory, what kind of courses should be taught at the conservatory. And he writes this blue book, it's called the Blue Book, with guidelines to how to, create a conservatory. And Erkin first is a teacher at music teacher school, then later at the State Conservatory. He's not only a nationally important composer, but he has a lot of international awards, among which you can see Légion d'honneur, which is one of the most prestigious awards in France. Also the State Artist of Turkish Republic, which is also a very prestigious national award. Moving on to his piano compositions, you can see several from him, several compositions, 5 drops, easy pieces for children. As you may guess, they are designed, they are composed especially for children, but among which probably one of the most famous one is the Impressions. It's recorded a lot. 5 drops, 6 preludes, Impressions and Sonata. They have recordings by Hungaroton, Arte Nova, Pepperlands, and also by national recording brands like AK Music and Kalam Music. And it's possible to access them via Spotify, via iTunes, so if you want to ever listen to them, it's very easy to find the recordings. It's not as easy to find the scores, unfortunately, because they were mainly published by Ankara Conservatory and there aren't any republishing of the scores, so it's kind of hard to get into the scores, but it's easy to find the recordings of them. I will talk briefly about the Impressions. It's composed in 1937, so this is practically 7 years after he comes back to Ankara to start teaching. He's still pretty young as a composer. If you see the birth date, he's only 29 years old, so he's still a young composer, young teacher. And it's premiered by 1947, 10 years later, by his wife, Ferhunde Erkin, who is one of the first and most famous Turkish pianists. it was printed by Ankara State Conservatory at first, then it went out of print, but it was so popular. All the scores that we have are photocopies from, the previous students. Soon printing decided to reprint it again, and they did this copy, which I will leave here later on for the impressions. There are several recordings of it, which is easy to find. As you can see, the dates and the recording companies. And you can see that it's formed of different sections with descriptive titles. And each of them have a different character. Each piece has a different character in itself. You can play it as the whole set. If you want to perform the whole set, it's possible to perform the whole set. Or if you want to assign, your students some of the pieces, it's possible to play some of the pieces as a group. Or you can choose one or two. Today I chose the two pieces which are very popular among students. One is the Little Shepherd, and the other one is Zeybek, the Turkish folk dance. Now, if you know Fazıl Say, he's now probably one of the better known Turkish pianists. He plays this very little piece. It's a very simple piece, quite a lot. And he says, left hand repeats one pitch in a sorrowful, tired, and pained manner, as a bare and profound kaval melody, kaval as an instrument, arises from the right hand. The Little Shepherd is a music filled with magic. So that's what he's saying about this very short composition. What I'll play this for you, then we can talk a little bit about that. So it's a very, very, very simple piece. It's not, there isn't much happening. Rhythmically, it's written in freestyle. You don't have the metronome, you don't have a meter, you don't have the measures. But it's a little bit difficult for a younger student, because for someone who's used to seeing meters and who's used to seeing regular rhythms, you have to really teach the child, how to read the rhythm exactly as it's written. Then you can relax it a little bit. You can relax it and almost play it as if it is improvised. So it is a simple, simple little composition, and it has some, technical difficulties in it when you look at the rhythms. But it's very nice and simple. And then you go to Zeybek. Zeybek is a traditional dance from the Aegean coast. It's usually a stately dance done by men. The complex meter 9/8, you are probably all familiar with it, because Balkan music, as like the Turkish folk music, uses this irregular beats very often, very typically. So it is using the 4+5, the irregular rhythmic structure, and it has the stately manner of the dance. So I will also play this one for you, which has a different character. different in character compared to the Little Shepherd. If you can see, the difficulty comes in crossing hands in large octaves, because if you have a student with smaller hands, it's kind of difficult to assign this piece. Broken chords, jumps make it kind of more difficult for a intermediate level piano student. But still, you get this dance move in it, and you shouldn't use too much rubato in the performance of the piece. You can hear the different sections, the same, stately dance section versus the more melodic, softer sections in the music. The other pieces in Duyuşlar, some of them are more impressionist in style, some of them use folk themes as their source. So there's different combinations in the book. Now I want to move on to Adnan Saygun, who is probably one of the better known composers internationally, very famous national composer and also very famous international composer, conductor, ethnomusicologist. So he's done a lot for the music scene in Turkey during his lifetime. His first education starts in Izmir, and then he's also sent to Paris with a scholarship from the Turkish government. And an interesting name, you probably all know Vincent Dindy as a famous French composer. Paul Leflem is also a teacher of Erik Satie. So again, they had a chance to work with famous teachers. Then he comes back to Ankara. So he returns to Ankara, just like many other composers, start teaching at music teacher school. Then later he goes to Istanbul, because at the time in Istanbul there is the Istanbul Conservatory, which is now the conservatory which is connected to Istanbul University. He starts also teaching there. Then later on he starts in Istanbul State Conservatory, which opens up as the third conservatory, which right now is Mimar Sinan Fine Art Conservatory, where Dilba is teaching. So he taught at many different conservatories. These are not his only jobs. He conducted the Presidential Symphony Orchestra. And what is very interesting is that in 1936, Bela Bartok visited Ankara for a short time. And he first came to Ankara. New listeners. Okay, for newcomers, brief review. We are talking about piano compositions of Turkish composers, especially designed for children at an intermediate and early advanced level. Now we are talking about Adnan Saygun. The Bela Bartok visit to Turkey is very interesting, because Bela Bartok came to Ankara, and they took him around Ankara region, and they took him to south of Turkey, to Adana region, to collect folkloric melodies. They recorded them, and later on they put them into writing, and that was the basis of Folkloric Research Institute. And this is interesting because it gives a nice source for compositions which will use folkloric material and European style composition. So this is an interesting visit from Bela Bartok. He later on was advisor for the Turkish government, worked for the ministry, worked for TRT, which is the state television channel. So he was very, very active during his lifetime, and not only recognized nationally, but he has a lot of international awards. As you can see, some of them listed here. Again, Palm Academic by France, and of course, again, State Artist of Turkish Republic, an honor given to important artists. Bela Bartok Diploma, from Hungary, so you can see some of the awards on this list. And coming to his piano compositions, he has many different piano compositions. Today I will briefly talk about İnci's book, but if you want, more difficult repertoire, especially the etudes, the preludes and the etudes on aksak rhythms, which means the irregular rhythms, are very good for advanced piano students, and also possible to find on internet, on iTunes, on Spotify, from different companies like Naxos, AK Music, Bilkent University Productions, so different national and international companies have recordings of these works. His copyrights are not in Turkey, unfortunately. Sajem has his copyrights, Par Music in Germany, and also Southern Music Publishing and Corporation in the United States. So he was well recognized in his own lifetime, and people just took his copyrights. So unfortunately, we don't have his copyrights in Turkey, but in Europe and in the United States. So it's possible to hear and find the scores and find the recordings with Adnan Saygun. And Bilkent University in Ankara right now has a special museum designed for him with all of his compositions, his personal belongings. So they did a nice work with that. You know, they created an Adnan Saygun section, which is very interesting if you want to play or research his compositions. The Inci's book, Inci was the name of one of his the daughter of one of his best friends, and it was composed for her, so it's a book for children, and it's dedicated to Madame Eugène Borel, who was his theory and counterpoint teacher. And the book was so popular that Southern Music Publishing published it in the United States. And Piano Quarterly News, again in the United States, named it as one of the best pieces composed for younger children. And later you see the recording by Naxos in 2008. Very simple pieces, designed for children, but they are not like the other ones. They don't really have many folkloric elements in them, only maybe pentatonic scales if you see it as a Turkish folkloric element, but mostly in Western style. Two pieces that are really popular from the book, Inci, the first one, the children love it, and Afacan Kedi, the Playful Kitten, also is quite famous. I'll play the second one, the Playful Kitten, so you kind of have an idea about what it sounds like. And time concern, I won't play Inci. So this is Playful Kitten. Sometimes I tell my students it's like a Chinese melody, so we give it different names more than typical traditional folkloric music. But when you look at the whole book, you can work on symmetrical and asymmetrical meters. You can work on finger turns. You can work on octaves. So all different pieces have different characters in them. Some of them more folkloric than the other ones. But this is one of the most favorite ones, so I chose that one for today. Now, moving on from Adnan Saygun, but as I said, if you are interested in advanced repertoire, the etudes, they are recorded by Hande Dalkılıç, a Turkish pianist, are very, very nice, especially if you are preparing for a competition and you want to play something contemporary and not, very traditional. That's a very good repertoire to choose from. Ekrem Zeki Un, just a couple years younger than the rest of them. What is interesting about him that he probably has the most amount of piano compositions for children, but he actually was a violin player. He was not a pianist himself, but he composed a lot. He's a violinist, conductor, pedagogue, composer. His first teacher is also the composer of our national anthem. His father was one of the music students in the palace in Müzikhaneyi Humayun, and later the director, the conductor of Presidential Symphony Orchestra. So he comes from a musical tradition. He goes to Paris again with a music scholarship, works with different people there, with different composers and with different violinists. So he has a very strong education, comes back to Ankara in 1930, becomes the violin teacher at Music Teachers School, then becomes member of Presidential Symphony Orchestra, moves to Istanbul, becomes one of the main teachers at Istanbul Municipal Conservatory, and forms a conservatory orchestra which is still active today. So he starts the foundation that day, and we still have that conservatory orchestra in Istanbul. And he writes a lot of, as I said, a lot of piano compositions for children. And here are some of his compositions. You can see the impression here, so you kind of get the idea that that was one of the, trends at that time to compose, an impression like the impressionistic pieces. Today I will talk about güzelleme, yiğitleme, and köçekçe, which are inspired by Turkish rhythms and Turkish folkloric themes. Also, I brought with me Anadolu and Alpertunga, which are more difficult pieces. So if anyone interested, I will leave the scores here for future reference. Güzelleme and yiğitleme, they are composed for his own daughter, and they are composed in 1962, so he is a little bit older at that time. And they are published by Remzi Publishing House, which is one of the still famous publishing houses in Turkey. But unfortunately, they don't republish these, so hopefully my plan for the future is to get these reorganized, these pieces, and published in the future for future reference. I'll play this song. Again, you see the 9/8 meter. For you and for us, this meter is not very surprising, because we are used to hearing it in traditional music. But for Central Europe, for United States, who are used to hearing 9/8 in ta ta ta ta ta ta ta ta ta ta ta ta ta ta ta ta, this 9/8 is quite difficult to understand. So this is in 9/8. It's you will hear the repetitive patterns as well. So let me play güzelleme for you. It's a continuous 9/8 pattern. You can hear the melodic line, And the jumps are kind of difficult and the feeling of the pattern is difficult because you are not supposed to make too much rubato in it. You have to keep the rhythm, otherwise the 9/8 rhythm, if you lose the sense of the rhythmic connection there, it kind of gets lost. The second one, Yiğitleme, this is a traditional folk song about heroism. It's based on 7/8 meter, so it's again based on an irregular meter. And then you see the sudden metric changes in it. You know, it goes from 2/8 to 7/8 to 5/8, so you just kind of see different changes in the music. I will also play this one for you, so you have an idea. Now, this is a heroic traditional dance, but it's much different than Zeybek, because Zeybek is a slow, moving dance. This one is a little bit more lively. There's a lot of staccato in it, so you can hear the changes. The jumps are maybe a little bit difficult for a younger student. Next piece, I will talk about it, but I don't know if I'll have time to play it, is Köçekçe. It's dedicated to Hülya Saydam, who is one of the famous Turkish pianists, who is still also a teacher at Mimar Sinan Fine Arts State Conservatory. It was composed in 1962, same year, and later, 2 years later, was published again by Remzi Publishing House. Again, this one is inspired by a Turkish traditional dance. The metric structure is 7/8, again, an irregular metric structure. But the chord structures in this one is a little bit more complicated. You hear somewhat of a more modern sound, in the music. So it's a little bit different than the previous two compositions we have talked about. Actually, if I have time, it's short, so I'll play this one too. One other thing, I don't know if you know the Köçek tradition, but Köçek tradition is that for certain events, especially in southern Turkey, men dress up as women and they dance. And it's a very typical tradition that goes a long way. So in places where women were not allowed, like in men entertainment places where female dancers were not allowed, they use köçeks, which are male dancers. They dress up as female dancers and they dance. And it's a typical tradition, and later it kind of went out of fashion, so you don't see that tradition as much anymore. But one of my colleagues from school is doing a research on köçek, because it's a tradition that you see in the weddings, you see in different, surrounding situations. So it is inspired by that kind of dance. But surprisingly, it's not as fast as Yiğitleme, it's not as fast as the previous song that you have heard. can hear the dance patterns in it, but the chordal structures are a little bit more complicated compared to the other pieces. Now the last composer I will talk about is Yüksel Koptagel. She's born in 1931. She's still alive today, and she lives part-time in Argentina and part-time in Istanbul. I had the chance to meet her a couple months ago during a concert. She's this fiery lady, you know, she has a lot of temper, she's very motivational when you are an artist, and she's a composer, pianist, and she was first well known as a pianist. She was an internationally recognized pianist. Starts her first piano studies in Istanbul with ranog-naprednog. Later, with a grant from Spanish government, not from the Turkish government, she gets enrolled in conservatories in Spain. So her music has Spanish elements as much as Turkish elements. So not only, you know, Turkish folkloric elements, but also elements from Spain. For some time she goes to Paris, and there she has a chance to work with Alicia de la Rocha, a famous Spanish pianist. So she also gets education on composition and has a large selection of works for piano. Little Brian's Diary is, as you may guess, is for younger children. We'll talk a little bit about Epitaphio today, composed in 1959, and we'll also briefly talk about Toccata 1958. Toccata is a more difficult piece, so it's a more advanced composition, which you can again use, you know, for early advanced students. And this selection also Sajem holds her copyrights, and they are published by Max Eschik and Bote Bok, so it's possible to find these editions from Amazon, and it's also possible to find the recordings from different recording companies, so it's possible to get a hold of these compositions. Quite interesting works, quite fiery works. Some of them are very technical because she was a pianist herself. She didn't stop writing quite virtuosic things for the piano. Toccata was was recognized by Paris Radio as one of the best compositions. Same kind of metrics, you know, writing. But today I decided to perform for you Epitaphio, because Epitaphio is a work that is written for a child who died. So it's a more romantic work, and I think it's more Spanish in character than Turkish. So Toccata is more folklorically Turkish, but I wanted you to see her scale of composition. It's a very simple composition, very romantic composition. A lot of the young students like it because of the overall sounds more popular than maybe classical. So this is, okay, let me go, okay, now I couldn't go back, so we are now in the conclusion part. Epitaphio from Yüksel Koptagel. much different in character. As you can see, it's more Spanish, more, it's softer. So it may go, if you are working on, let's say, Chopin mazurka, it's very easy to combine it with this type of composition. Now, today I concentrated mainly on easier works which are designed specifically for education. But as I said, if you are a more advanced pianist, you can use the other works in the repertoire, to add as contemporary pieces, to take them as pieces for competitions. It's possible to do it as a, refreshing new kind of repertoire. If you think, how you can combine them, like Ingi's book is very easy to combine with notebook for Anna Magdalena Bach. They have similar kind of technical requirements. Duyuşlar en güzelleme can be combined with Bach inventions and sinfonias or Clementi sonatinas. Also, duyuşlar yiğitleme en köçekçe may be combined with mazurkas because they're a little bit more difficult. Same with epitafio, it can be combined with mazurkas, and toccata can be combined with more difficult sonatas and more difficult compositions. Why I think this is important? Because, of course, I like this repertoire because I find it interesting because of the combination of folkloric elements with European style. It's not very modern in sound, but it's still different than Bach, it's still much different than Mozart and Clementi, this traditional repertoire. So it adds a little bit of flavor, different kind of approach. And as a student, when you learn to look at different things, when you learn to read different repertoire, to read different kind of rhythm, different kind of approach to music, then as an adult pianist, as an older pianist, you have a larger spectrum. It's easier to learn a modern piece when someone tells you, I have to play this in my, graduation. Could you please accompany me? And you have 2 weeks to learn, a flute accompaniment for contemporary piece, and you're like, oh my God, what am I gonna do? So it gives you a larger vision. It's best when you know things when you start things at an earlier age. Also, it helps, it creates some kind of a curiosity about a different culture, what kind of things are done, what kind of pieces are composed, who are these people? So it kind of creates a more intellectual environment for the pianist rather than playing the standard repertoire. Of course, I'm not saying you shouldn't play the standard repertoire. We have to learn the standard repertoire, that's for sure, but this adds to the standard repertoire, and it gives another edge, it gives another perspective, it gives another way to look at it intellectually. So I find them quite interesting. And my hope for the future as one of my projects is to redo these pieces and get them republished. Because unfortunately, I'm going to leave my scores here for the ones who are interested, so it can stay in the library. But you are going to see that there are photocopies with a lot of markings on them. So it would be nice to see this perfect, Henle Urtex-like score and just go and buy it from a store. So that's my dream for the future. Hopefully it will come true. And thank you very much for listening today to this presentation. Do you have any questions about any of the works or any of the composers? Okay, all right, well, thank you very much. Thanks for listening.
Moje ime, ljudima koji su pristigli kasnije, ja sam Andrej Vinčić, profesor orkestarskih dionica i klarineta na Fakultetu umetnosti. Da kažem, ono što je bila, kako stvari ova saradnja proizašla pre nepunih godinu dana, imali smo zajednički koncert u Istanbulu, Dilba Tokaj, Dilba, if you can come on the stage, just to give you this. Dakle, iz te saradnje, kažem, proizašao i koncert na koji bih vas uredno i pozvao. Sutra je od 20 časova u sali Fakultetu umetnosti Knjaža Učka. Tako da izvršimo pored, da kažem, repertoara koja je već uobičajen Beethovena, serenada Emila Hartmana. I interesantna stvar, trio Nina Rote, koja je, da kažem, komercijalni poznat, to jest po muzici koju je komponovao za film Pum. Tako da je to ovako vrlo interesantna, da kažem, simbioza. I hteo bih, I would like to thank you for your lecture and in the name of faculty to give you this small present.
Oh, thank you.
So this is for Milva and for you.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you very much.
This small graphics. So thank you so much for coming. And I hope that, kako kaže ona stara floskula, this is the beginning of the beautiful friendship.